Hi, my name's Chris Beach. I'm the owner of Spacebot Interactive and the project director and developer of Dragonyhm for the ModRetro Chromatic. My co-developer goes by the name Cowboy, and this is our developer spotlight. So Dragonyhm is an adventure RPG set in a high fantasy world during a new peaceful era off the back of an age-long war against dragons. You'll enter the Dragonyhm world as the son of an esteemed war hero who's recently gone missing, and you set out to find him. Along the way, you'll learn of various things going awry and an emergent evil that threatens the kingdom. The core trinity of Dragonyhm gameplay comprises exploration, solving, and battling. There are classic RPG combat elements like stats and turn-based battles, but they're blended with real-time challenges such as navigating around enemies and hazards. Encounters are not random. Many enemies will visibly give chase in the overworld and dungeons, and most can be skillfully avoided. While the narrative is essentially linear, you'll find yourself in these moments where you've just finished some quest or objective and have no direction for what's next, other than from the people you choose to talk to or your own adventurous spirit. As great adventure games often are, Dragonyhm is rife with dungeons to solve. There are 3 tiers of dungeon: challenge dens, main or major dungeons, and sealed dungeons. Challenge dens are largely avoidable and are sort of one-off puzzles or tough enemies that are confined to a single room and offer a prize. Main dungeons are multiple rooms, vary in length, and have challenges housed within. They are more thematic and lend themselves to the narrative. Sealed dungeons are a subset of main dungeons that feature the strongest dragons that remain from the war and are generally longer and more difficult. Dragonyhm actually started off as a much simpler project in terms of scope. It was due to be a colorization only of a previous release. And after noticing Cowboy's talents in the GBS server, I reached out to him and he joined the team. At the same time we were working on the game, GB Studio was making huge strides in terms of features available to developers. This caused us to migrate the project a few times to new versions of the engine, but allowed us to greatly improve pretty much every aspect of the game. And our ideas evolved so much that the game actually became something almost entirely new, which is how Dragonyhm was born. My idea for Dragonyhm originally came from my love for the Zelda series and being an avid fan of classic RPGs such as Grandia, Dragon Quest, the Final Fantasy series, and Pokemon, which is why the game has a mixture of real-time enemy behaviour, puzzles, and turn-based battles. We've basically taken elements from the games that we love and included them in some way in Dragonyhm and put our own spin on them. So my primary job is heading up the game development side of the business at ModRetro. I previously ran a commercial property brokerage for 7 years, and the pandemic had a pretty big impact on the industry. So that business went very quiet throughout lockdown, and I had a lot more free time on my hands. I've always been a huge fan of the Game Boy. It was the first console I owned as a kid, and I'd always dreamt of developing software for it. I'd been interested in game development for some time, and although extremely limited back then, GB Studio was robust enough that you could develop a full RPG-like experience. So I set out to learn everything I could about the engine and started to develop my first game. And it received a really encouraging amount of attention, so I decided to self-publish that title, which is when I incorporated Spacebot. The game became one of the best-selling indie Game Boy games of its time. Fast forward to present day, and my experience in development and project management, along with my understanding of how to run a business, actually opened up an opportunity to work for ModRetro, which is a dream come true. So now I'm able to apply my skills to help push Game Boy development and retro gaming forward through working with our incredible developers to help get their games to market and released for the Chromatic. Since about 2016, Cowboy Bumbis had been casually making chiptune music with Family Tracker and occasionally posting originals and covers on YouTube. He dabbled in pixel art before, but had only begun to seriously try to get into it in the early months of the pandemic lockdowns. He had an ongoing desire to make art and found 8-bit music and graphics to be less intimidating to get into because of the limitations. He became aware of GB Studio, but at the time he didn't take it too seriously as it seemed quite limited. But months later, he caught wind of some robust new features and began to seriously entertain the notion of making a Game Boy game. In the early stages of one of his personal projects, he'd share pixel art in the GB Studio Discord, which is where I noticed his talents, and we got chatting, and now we've been working on Dragonyhm together for the last 3 years. Thank you so much for your time. If you'd like to pick up a copy of Dragonyhm, you can do so by pre-ordering at modretro.com. Thank you so much for the support, and we'll catch you soon. Cheers.